Analysts are predicting property prices will fall this year as the RBA raised its rates another 50 basis points this month. Anne Flaherty, economist at REA Group, joins me now. Great to see you. How are you, Anne?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well indeed. Well, as we said, this week the Reserve Bank increased interest rates as expected, but a lot higher for some that anticipated for a second consecutive month. How is it impacting the property market and what are we likely to see over the coming months?
You're right. The increase was higher than what most analysts were predicting. What we will see is that, the higher interest rates go and the faster interest rates go, the more pressure this is going to put on people looking to borrow and to buy a home. So all else equal, higher interest rates put downwards pressure on property prices, and we're already starting to see that filter into the market. So if we look at last month, we actually started to see our first price declines around the country. Melbourne and Sydney recorded a modest but a decline. On the other hand, the other states seem so far to be relatively resilient. But again, the question is, depending on how quickly the Reserve Bank move on interest rates, that will have a significant impact on prices.
So then how does the location affect what is likely to happen in prices, regional and state capitals?
Yeah, it is interesting the different trends we're seeing. So, for example, South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland as well. So far, they're proving relatively resilient. Now, on realestate.com.au, we can see how many people are searching to buy property, and we have seen a decline in Melbourne and Sydney, which is a sign that demand is starting to slow in those markets. Having said that, in the West Coast, South Australia, Queensland, search activity is still actually very elevated. It's even higher than what we saw last year in those markets. So I would suggest that even though interest rates are rising, because buyer demand is elevated in those markets, that will help to offset to some degree the interest rate rises that we're seeing.
And what about rentals? Because we're seeing a rental crisis. It's continuing. We're reading about people having to give up their pets, millions of people under huge amounts of stress. What's happening in the rental market?
The rental market's extremely concerning. What we've been seeing at REA for quite some time now is a decrease in the number of rental properties on the market. Now, one of the key reasons for that is that over the last 2 years, more investors have been selling properties than buying. Partly that's because of the high price growth that we saw. A lot of investors wanted to take on those capital gains and sell, but that's reduced the overall supply of rental properties in the market, which is increasing competition. So now that population growth is coming back as well, this is even more concerning, and we're likely to continue to see rents rise really very rapidly throughout this year.
And is that across the board, so for regional, rural, city areas?
We're seeing it across the board. So, from the time that the pandemic kicked in, we saw a lot of people shift to regional areas, which pushed up rents a lot in those places. The increase in vacancy we saw in the capital cities has now retreated, and actually vacancy in most of Australia's CBDs and inner city markets is now actually below pre-COVID levels. So when you think about the fact that, we've had 2 years where Australia's population hasn't grown that much, the fact that vacancy is now at these pre-COVID levels already is really concerning.
Well, it certainly is, but we really do appreciate your time and expertise, Anne Flaherty, and we'll see you soon right here on Sky News. Thank you very much.